You to introduce yourself a little bit to the viewers, and then we'll kind of go on from there.
All right, sounds good. Hello, everybody. First I'd like to thank Jalen for having me here today. It's an honor, and I appreciate the opportunity to work with you a little bit. My name is Alex Bennett. I'm actually a bartender by trade. I've been in restaurants for over 35 years now, and mostly as a bartender, but I've done a little bit of everything. I've managed them, I've served, I've worked in the back of house, worked in front of house, you name it, I've done it in restaurants. But recently I've written a book that's entitled Shot of Oakies, and with it I say I play with the history of whiskey. The history of whiskey is very murky, and I can go into more detail about it if you want to hear about it. But essentially what I do is I go back to 1743, and I have a young Scotswoman in America who wants to make whiskey, so she's kind of stumbling on the process of making bourbon. And at the same time, there's an Irish pirate, and every time she hears about an English ship that has a barrel of her Oakies aboard, she seizes the ship, she accuses the captain of smuggling, and she executes him. And you know how guys are, the more dangerous something is, the more we're going to want it. So as her stories grow, they cross the Atlantic and they reach an English pirate hunter who's fighting the war. The whole world was at war at the time. And he's got to decide what he wants to do next. But that's when I get the second and third books. It's actually a trilogy.
That's awesome. So I just love the whole everything about the book, how, it has a lot to do with alcohol and bourbon, and you are a bartender. So how much would you say, or how did bartending kind of influence your creation of the book?
Well, it's funny you ask that, because I tell everybody that sits at the bar, be careful. You might end up in a book, A lot of the characters in the book are regulars. In fact, there's one character, his name's Rags, and he is Rags. He was my first regular. My parents bought a place when I was 16 years old. That's how I got into restaurants, and started washing dishes, the night we took it over. Rags was one of the first regulars, and he was a World War II vet. He was actually stationed in Hawaii on December 7th, 1941. Now, he's in the Army. He wasn't in the Navy, but, he was there. He witnessed it firsthand, fought the Japanese all the way up to Tokyo, and had a very unique perspective on life. But he was a really good guy. I really got a lot along with him. And I needed that sort of character in my book. And he died a few years ago, but I always told him, you're going to make the book. You're going to be in the book. And he'd laugh and he'd go, you son of a bitch, or something like that. And I had to bring it in there. He really affected my life in a lot of ways. So
that's awesome.
But he's one of the characters. And then, knowing the history of being a bartender, I knew the history of whiskey. And so when I was inspired to write the book, I kind of was looking for ways, you kind of look for things to draw upon, and the long story short with that is that one of the girls I was working with, she was very tough. I work on the south side of Chicago, and I know a lot of very tough women, and she was one of them without a doubt. And I always used to say she'd make a good pirate. And one day she broke a glass and got a piece stuck in her eye, and it was a real mess for her. She had to wear an eye patch. And, so I told her one time I might have to write the old one-eyed Clarkson. And from there, the book just kind of started developing, It's weird how it works, it's weird how it works. But then, you just kind of bring everything together, bring the elements together. It kind of becomes like a soup, you add a little of this, a little of that, you start mixing it up. And the next thing you know, 10 years later, I'm doing an interview with you.
Wow, that's so cool, though. So I know sometimes writing a book is such a long process, especially with, for me, I'm writing a book also. And so for me, it was kind of especially coming from, food service and, restaurant service, you kind of gain an identity as, bartender or a server or a chef. And so stepping into something as broad as being an author is a whole different, it's like a whole different ball game. It's a whole different person or version of yourself. So how did that kind of come to be? Did you have any struggles going into writing the book, since you said it was about a 10-year process? What kind of things came up around that, along the journey?
Well, I'll tell you this, and I'd ask you, what's your book about?
So my book is called The Leap of Failure, Becoming Your Best Self. It's kind of like a self-help book, talking about a lot of the struggles that I've been through, and then just kind of using the stories to resonate with certain people, because I know a lot of people have been through a lot of different things. So a book is really just using my experiences to connect with people and kind of help with getting over mental struggles and life struggles and things like that.
Best thing you can write about. As a bartender, I get asked a lot. I get a lot of people that tell me, I want to write a book. I want to write a book. You got any advice? And there's three things I always tell everybody, and the first thing comes from Hemingway. He had said the first draft of anything is crap. And you got to write with that sort of sense. You just want to get your thoughts down on paper, get it out there. Don't worry about spelling. Don't worry about grammar. Don't worry about repetitive word use or any of that sort of stuff. Get your stories down. Even the structure of the book. If you got a bunch of different stories that you're drawing upon, you can you get those down, and then you kind of figure out, okay, this one will be better in front of this one, or this one will be better at the end. This one's going for the beginning. That sort of thing. And then the second thing I tell everybody is write what you know. Because you already have the people in your mind. You already have the stories. You're not trying to conceptualize anything, So one of your characters, their mannerisms, the way they talk, their actions that they're gonna do, and so by that token, it makes it much easier to write it because it's already there. You just got to get it from here to the paper. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Now, that's a trick in itself, and that brings me to my third thing, and that is you got to treat it like a job. Like on Thursdays, for example, I close the bar, so I don't start until 4. And on Thursday mornings, man, I'm in front of my computer by 10 o'clock, and I'm writing until 3, until literally I got to go to work,
Wow.
And I don't care if I get 2 sentences down or I get 20 pages down. For those 5 hours, I'm in front of my computer, and I tell everybody, man, treat me like I'm at work. Don't expect me to call you back. No, I'm not going to make plans. No, it's not just a writing day. Can I skip it? No, it's my job, and I have to stay dedicated to it like that. And that's how you overcome a lot of the hurdles, because there's going to be days where it's frustrating, but then there's other days, you get on a roll, and you get on that roll, you get done with it, you're like, all right, and it's not a linear progression. It's more of a roller coaster, and when you come to understand that and accept it, it just gets easier then, I'm not going to say it gets easier to write, but it gets easier the process gets easier. That makes sense.
That does make sense. I like the way you said that. What we call that is like stepping into your new identity. So it's like you're saying, hey, if I'm an author, I'm going to put the time in, and I'm putting the time blocks in, and this is the time that I'm writing. And you're literally embodying that. It's like, yes, I'm a bartender, but I'm also a writer. You're not in just a box. And so I think that's a beautiful thing, especially when you're you're stepping into an identity shift. Because you're literally doing what it would take to be a writer. You're blocking out this from 10 to 3. I'm not hanging out with y'all. I'm not talking on the phone. This is the time that I'm designated to write. And I think that's really one of the first hugest steps to actually stepping into whatever your new identity is. Like you said, treat it like a job. Treat it like as if you were already doing it full time, or what, you're actually setting yourself up for that.
It becomes your identity, and you got to embrace it, and that's when you do, it's like anything else, it took a long time for me to embrace being a bartender, and that's another story, but once I did, it kind of became, all right, this is what I am, this is what I'm good at, so this is what people associate me with, and whatever, it's worked out. It's been a good gig, I can't complain about it at all.
That's awesome. And so there's a part when you sent me the little summary, it talked about how you had decades long of, talking with people and all these different experiences as, while you're talking to people as a bartender. So how did these different experiences, talking to people and just seeing the different walks of life, how did that shape your perspective on life and people?
Well, that's a great question, because growing up, the place I worked at, it was very much a neighborhood bar. You saw the same 20, 30 people week in and week out. And what had happened, so my parents bought this place when I was 16, and I worked there until I was 30. And along the way, my parents sold it to my in-laws, and then they became my former in-laws, and that sent me out. Now, before I say anything else, I'll say it was the best thing that happened to me, because it got me out. I was on the hamster wheel, you know?
Yeah.
Day in, day out, day in, day out. You just worry about this restaurant. And I never really experienced a lot more of life. And so I ended up getting a job at a corporate place then. And that exposed me to a very diverse crowd, you know?
Yeah.
And in doing so, I got to know, you know, it was truly on the south side of Chicago. And so there was, I mean, when I say to you, there is everybody from every background, racial, religious, cultural, whatever. They're all coming in there. And it was great. It was the best thing that happened to me, because I made great friends, like across the board, you know, political spectrum, whatever. You know, I get along with everybody.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and it got me over any prejudices I have, it got me over any biases I have, because now I'm seeing people firsthand. And it's not what I'm seeing on TV or movies or whatever else. And so it, you know, in creating a lot of those friendships, then I grew as a person, you know. Then things that where I maybe thought something or accepted life was this way, I realized, whoa, no, there is a very different perspective here, and there's a very good reason why it's a different way. And so, and because of that, you know, it was the best thing that happened to me, because then as my life progressed, you know, I faced things where if I was younger and I would have been facing them, it would have been a struggle for me, but I knew to accept them and take them for what they were and put them in perspective. You know, a lot of stuff isn't important, you know, and that's kind of part of it.
Yeah, I like that, because one thing that I always say is, like, you can really learn from anybody. Like, it doesn't matter if they're a child, it doesn't matter if they're an elderly person that's like 90, it doesn't matter if they're someone that's your age. You can learn a different perspective from anybody, because everyone thinks differently, everybody sees differently, and there's, you know, just to be able to see just life through another lens, I feel like I think that's huge. And I think that's really a cool thing as far as like inspiration when it comes to a book, because you can kind of draw from different people's experiences and or experiences that you've had with other people, and just picking their brain just by having conversations, you know.
Absolutely.
You know, it's amazing. You know, I do Lyft, and so I talk to a lot of people every single day, and you learn so much, you know, but you wouldn't expect that. Like, a lot of people wouldn't think that, but when you have a mind of a learner, you realize that you can absorb from literally anything.
Anybody. Absolutely.
Yes. Really. Do you have any like specific, or I guess really memorable conversations or memorable people that, you know, you've had, you know, come into the restaurant or come into the bar, that you've had conversations with? Do you have any specific, I guess, like prolific conversations that you've had?
Well, you know, one of the ones I always go back to is my buddy Rags. So this was early or late 80s, 87, 88, when the war on drugs was declared. And he had said to me then, and I'm going to tone it down a little bit, because he was very much, I always say he could curse to a melody, but he had said to me then, you want to know where all these drugs come from, or this problem with drugs comes from? It's from all those wars. So back before World War II, we had guys, sure, we drank too much. And, you know, you had some guys that smoked marijuana and stuff like that. But in the end, you didn't have any of this other stuff. But you had guys going to those wars. They're getting just unbelievable wounds. They're getting maimed. They're in a ton of pain. They'd fill them up with morphine while they were there. They'd patch them up. They'd send them home. They'd give them nothing for all that. So they're all in a lot of pain. And they're looking for something that'll get them through it. And then on top of it all, you got the guys that, you know, it got in their head in a way that they just couldn't forget it. And so they're looking for ways to forget it. And that's why they started getting into these drugs. It created the demand for these drugs. And if we didn't have to go fight all those blah, 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 blah wars, we wouldn't have any of these problems today. Wow. When I looked at him, I said, wow, Regs, that's pretty poignant. I never looked at it like that.
I didn't either. Wow.
No. that was one of my one of my favorite conversations that I've ever had, because it made me think, and I started seeing life from a very different perspective. And if I were to think of another one, during the, this was probably 2013 to 2014. It was when Syria was a mess, and there was a civil war starting there, and I had a regular who was from Syria, and he had family still over there, and so I'd ask him, what's really going on, what's the story, and he put it in perspective for me. He said, the government does terrible things, there's no doubt about that, but their position was, as long as you don't mess with us, we won't mess with you. So they'd leave Christians alone, they'd leave the Jews alone, they'd leave all the different Muslim sects alone. It was more about power for them, which is its own problem. But he said, the people that would then that challenged their power, well, then they were going to come after them in all these different ways. And he's like, if you were over there right now, you see what you see in the news, but it's not like that. We would be sitting here at your bar, and 2 blocks over, there'd be a neighborhood that was completely barricaded, where there'd be fighting going on. We could hear the artillery, we could hear the gunshots.
Wow.
I'd be sitting here having lunch, And so it's not what you think it is in terms of like this, what we perceive as war from images from World War II or Vietnam or Korea or whatever. It's more very localized in these neighborhoods, and the fighting's there, and life everywhere else is pretty much just normal. When you hear stuff like that from people who are there or have family members or something who are there, it's a totally different experience, and it's a totally different lesson. And so, that was another one that I realized, wow, okay, what I think is not the truth, or what I perceive is not the truth. And, so I always look forward to seeing them. And whenever he come back, I'd say, okay, what's the story with the war? What's the story with the war? And I'd get more updates that I felt were more honest and more like practical than anything else I was getting anywhere else.
That's awesome. So, So when it comes to the book and everything, working in the industry, how would you say that this all like influenced your style of writing? And because I know like some of the people were, some of the regulars were like in the book or as characters. So how would you say that like just working in the industry in general, kind of, because everyone has a different type of writing style, how would you say that the work in the industry as a bartender kind of influenced the way that you write?
Well, to be honest, I got to go back a little bit to my past. So when I left Maury's, my parents' restaurant, I didn't know what to do. And this was 2010. Everybody was like, male teachers, we need male teachers. So I went back to school. I got my master's in education, and I got certified to teach English. So I had learned then, how to write. And the problem I had was that I was one of, the housing market had just collapsed, and I was one of 1,200 people applying for these different jobs, and I didn't have any connections or any ends. So as a result, and that's how I ended up really embracing my role as a full-time bartender, because I needed a job. It was a good job, and I was doing well, and hey man, and I could work it around my custody. But ultimately, to answer your question, I had learned how to teach people the basics on how to write, and so I applied that knowledge to myself, and that's what I kind of tell people. You take if you want to write a book and you're intimidated by writing, well, just take a basic writing class, learn sentence structure, learn the grammar, learn the rules, so to speak, and then you can manipulate them for yourself. And so when it comes to writing style, it's like one of my and this was probably one of the best benefits I have being a bartender as a writer, was that I could bring rough drafts down and give them to my regulars and have them read it, read a chapter or read a couple pages and give me some feedback. At first you want to hear how great it is, but I'll be honest with you, after a while, I wanted them to tell me what was wrong with it, because that was the only way it's going to get better,
Yeah.
And yes, you want to have your ego stroked, but in the end, if it's not gonna improve the story, man, cut to the chase. Tell me what I need to work on here, And one of my regulars had pointed out. Now, she had been an editor for the AP, so it was truly a diamond in the rough sort of experience for me. And she pointed, so I got my pirate. She's on her ship. Her hair's blowing wildly in the wind, right? And she said, well, the way you have this written, you're pirates on the ship, but the ship's hair is blowing wildly in the wind, you know? So I'm going, okay, I gotta change this, and and so I got that feedback, and then that helped me see where I was making other mistakes. And then I had another person tell me, man, you use the word with a lot, yeah, and it's easy to use the word with. He's holding the sword with his left hand and sailing with her best friends, and you can use the word with a lot of different ways. So when they pointed that out, I realized I had like 4 or 5 whiffs in one paragraph. And so, okay, I got to change that. And now when I write, I consciously only try to use with once per paragraph, and if I don't use it in any paragraph, that's like a serious victory for me. But if I find myself using it, sometimes I'll let a second one slip through, but never more than 2. And if I see myself doing it on the 3rd time, well, okay, I got to figure out a way to rewrite this, Yeah. And then, another thing to do, it's easy to fall into serial comments. He carried a sword, a flintlock pistol, and a dagger, And so when I do serial comments, I try to only use those maybe once every 2 or 3 paragraphs,
I'll switch it up.
And switch it up. And, sometimes you put the action in the beginning of the sentence and the explanation in the end. So other times you put the explanation that leads into the action, and so that's, I guess, where being a bartender helped me develop my style, because I get feedback from people where I was making my mistakes or ways to improve my writing. And so I take it home and I, get at it and devote my thinking toward making those changes.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, when you were kind of started getting into the writing, did you have like mental blocks or any struggles when you first started, or was it just
all the time, and that's part of being a writer. Every job has its bad, so to speak. Yeah. and that's the bad part about it, because there's times, man, when and especially when you got that blank sheet of paper and you got to conceptualize it. You got to see it for the time. You got to come up with what character do I want here? How do I want this scene to play out? Now, I did not do this, but one thing I learned through the process that I try to tell other people is outline. Outline it as much as you can ahead of time, because if you're doing the outline, this is where you want the second chapter to go. So it's starting here and it's getting here. Okay, what characters do I need, and where do I need to start them at, and like what events do I need to have happen to get them from point A to point B? And the more you do that, then the writing is just kind of becomes fleshing out. Now, the way to get over the writer's block, though, is again, I treat it like a job. And that's where I say, I don't care if I only do 2 sentences on a day. And there's times when I'm just constantly circling through those 2 sentences. I'll sit there for 5 hours. And sometimes, I struggle through that point, but then that night comes and I sleep. And then the next day I wake up and I might realize, okay, this is the problem. This is what you're missing. To make your writing better, you want to touch on as many senses as you can. And I always say, if you can get 3 in a scene, that's a lot. So you always got sight, you got hearing, maybe involves the sense of smell or the sense of taste, or, or feeling or whatever. So that way it brings it more alive. And sometimes that's kind of, I'll sit back, okay, what senses do I have? And I only see 2 of them. Okay, how am I going to get a 3rd one in here? And then that kind of opens up everything else. And then it starts to flow again. So there's tricks you just kind of learn from it, but understand that, you're going to have bad days writing too. And you're going to get frustrated, and it's going to be the way it's going to be. Whatever, man. Every pitcher has a bad day on the mound. I don't care how good they are.
That's so true.
The next day you get back on that mound and you strike them out.
Absolutely. When you first started writing, would you say, because I know, like, when I was doing, like, when I was a chef and when I was a cook or a server, and then wanted to transition into doing other types of things, some of the people around me weren't as supportive as I would think. Did you seem to have any like situations like that come up, maybe family or friends, like, well, a writer, what are you trying to write for? Did you have any people kind of like challenge your new identity shift?
all the time, you know, and there's all the time and even when people would read my stuff, they tell me, oh, this is terrible, you know, and you got to kind of take all that, you know, with a grain of salt. You got to look at it, you know, in the end, you know, you got to figure out your priorities in life. And if your priority is to write a book, well, you develop your identity from that. And if other people are telling you, oh man, you're wasting your time, or oh man, that's a terrible idea, or oh, the number one thing, you know, writing a bestseller is like impossible. The chances of doing it are slim to none, and this and that. Well, if I heard that, if I gave up after all the times I heard that, you know, I would have never finished the book.
Yeah.
It's true. I mean, it is true, and I know that. But in the end, you know, I also kind of look at it as this is what I want to do in life. What,
yeah.
You know, it's better for me to spend my free time sitting in front of my computer writing a book than getting into some sort of trouble or developing a bad habit, or, you know, idle minds are the devil's playground. So it's best that I stay focused on my thing, and whatever happens from it, happens from it. And that's kind of what I learned to say. Yeah, I probably won't write a bestseller, and yeah, I probably won't make that big of a difference in my life, but in the end, I enjoy it. So what else do you want me to do with my life? And that's what matters. And I think that's what anybody going into any different thing, you know, people tell you you're crazy, oh, you're wasting your time, or oh, you know, you got a good thing here, why are you going to try that there? Well, that's what I want to do. And we only live once, you know. We
only live once.
And the older I've gotten, the more I appreciate it, because we only get so much time, and you never know when it's coming to an end. So dedicate yourself to the thing that you want to do.
I really appreciate what you just said there, because I feel like a lot of people let the others kind of dictate like their box. Because I think one thing I heard someone say before is a lot of times when people are telling you can't do something, it has nothing to do with you. It's everything to do with them. It's what they don't see themselves doing. So
yeah.
You know, so like they're trying to put the limitation on you. But that doesn't mean anything about me, you know, because I'm about to write. I'm about to do it, you know. So yeah. I like what you said there when you said, you know, you're not paying attention to that. If you would have listened to that, I mean, because the same thing happened to me when I started doing podcasting. I had a lot of people like, "What? I don't understand why." Like, "Oh, you're not getting that many views. Oh, you're not getting that many this." And you know, it's so hard to become a big podcaster or whatever. And I was like, I enjoy doing it. At the end of the day, if I don't do anything else with it, and even if I only touch one or two people, like I'm happy. You know, like, and exactly. I feel like people really should. They should go for their passions. You know, if you're passionate, the fact that you're passionate about writing, you know, and bartending, I feel like that's a great life to live. Even if you don't do, you know, you don't become like the Kobe Bryant of writers or whatever, you know, like, but the fact that you are doing something that you enjoy, and I mean, that speaks volumes more than anything else, because a lot of people are scared to just do what they enjoy to do.
Well, the fear of success is just as real as the fear of failure, and people don't appreciate that. And there's a lot of people that, yeah, man, they have their secret dreams that they don't want to tell anybody about. They don't want to be open about it. They don't want to be transparent about it, because they know people are going to tell them that, you're wasting your time or whatever. You can't do it. Well, you know, they're your dreams, man. If you don't try to do them, nobody's going to do it for you, you know? Yeah. And that's kind of where you got to get to the point in your life where you're satisfied with yourself and you're confident in yourself. Wow. To try to say, hey man, I don't really care. And you're right on about what you say. You know, if you write your book and you put in, you know, the hours and hours and days and years that it takes to get it there, and 3 people read it, but those 3 people call you up and go, man, you changed my life. You know, that is going to be more satisfying than somebody calling you up and saying, hey, I bought your book. I didn't read it, but I bought your book, and I think it's great that you wrote it. You know, that's going to feel good too. Don't get me wrong. But by the same token, having somebody tell you that, you know, you entertain them or you help them, you know, even if it is just a couple people, man, that gives you purpose. It justifies the time that you spent, you know, and you never know where it'll lead. You know, you never know where it'll lead.
Absolutely. I love that. So I've got a couple more questions for you. One of the big questions I have is, what would you say are some of the biggest lessons and insights that you've gained from being a bartender and during this whole writing process? What are some of the biggest lessons that you've learned?
Man, good question. I'd have to go back to, like, you have to be yourself. One of the things and I do this with people, I could do it with you real quick. It's like, it's just a lesson that you do, where I help people figure out their priorities in life, and when I started this, I would say I was at a very low point in my life. I was struggling to figure out my own identity. I was struggling, my kids had gotten older, and I was always kind of proud to be a dad. I like being a dad. And suddenly they get older and they don't need you around as much anymore. And you kind of go to yourself, man, what do I do with myself? Where's my identity now? And so I figured out, what was important to me. And once I figured out my priorities, then it became, okay, all this other stuff that I think I should be doing. Being a bartender, there's a lifestyle that's associated with it. And I'm not going to say that I haven't enjoyed that lifestyle at some points in my life, but it got me nowhere. I'm 43, 44 years old, and I'm still in the same spot I was in at 35. I haven't grown, I haven't gotten past any of that. And that's when I realized, okay, I need to, if I want to achieve what I want to achieve in life, I need to give up this stuff. I need to stop trying to maintain this image, and I need to be more focused on what's important to me. And so I figured out my priorities. When I figured out my priorities, I figured out that writing a book was it's my fourth top priority, I say. My kids, my health, and the people I love are my top three.
That's awesome.
And then, I dedicated my time to it. And even when there was times, and there was plenty of times, working in restaurants, as you know, you can go out every night of the week. There is always somebody who wants to go out and have a good time. And those are actions, because if I go out tonight, I'm going to be too hungover to write tomorrow. And so I had to tell myself, you're not going to miss anything. What you're going to miss is the important thing in your life.
Wow.
So you need to go, and you need to go to bed. And, you need to wake up the next day and you need to get back at it and you need to forget about it. And you have that longing in your heart to go because, oh, man, it could be a lot of fun. This person's going to be there. That person's going to be there. Oh, man, But by the same token, you go, well, that person's not, not going to be around a year from now. My book is,
Yes.
This whatever happens tonight is going to be forgotten about a week from now, but I'm going to be one day less advanced or 2 days less advanced, and honestly, it can throw you off. And so, all of a sudden you go, well, writing's not that big of a deal because I'm having all this fun. Well, that fun's going to end at some point.
Yes.
And then am I going to be able to get back in the habit? Am I going to be able to get back, get that focus back a month from now or 6 months from now? And so I guess that's probably the biggest lesson that I learned,
Wow.
You got to stay focused on what's important and the things that will distract you. And there's always something that's going to distract you.
Always distractions.
Yeah. Once you know your priorities, though, it's easy to look at those distractions and go, oh, that's not that important. This is what's important. And I guess that's the biggest lesson I say I probably learned.
Man, I think that's so powerful because one of the things I heard, I can't remember where I heard this quote, but they say starting a business or starting up some type of endeavor is one of the biggest forms of self development and self growth because of all the things that come up inside of you, like the different traumas or different things that you've dealt with in the past or different limiting beliefs. They all come to the surface, and it comes to the point to where you're like, okay, if I'm going to do this, you start to identify like, oh, this is what I got to let go of, or this is what I have to prioritize, or this is what I have to, and that's something that I've been have struggled with before when it came to podcasting. The moment I was like, okay, I'm doing this every day. I'm posting every single day. Nothing can come in between that. I would have to be like, okay, if I'm going to go out with the friends or do this, then I need that. This has to be done first. So making it a priority really started to change everything. And it's really, it's really just powerful. Like what you just said, just the focus and you know, because that's a skill. I feel like focus is a skill. It's not just something that everybody just has, you know. It can be trained like a muscle. And I really believe I did write another novel. I wrote a novel before, but I'm doing a self-help book now. But I did like a kind of like a graphic novel, and it took me, I want to say it took me like a good 2 or 3 years to finish it. But it was just, I had to get into the mindset of, this is dedication. Like this is gonna get done. I have to do something. Even like you said, even if it's only a few pages, or if it's only a few sentences, something has to be written down on this paper every day. You know. And so I think like that's just really powerful when you really set yourself in motion. It's really just the steps, like taking steps every day, even if it's just little steps. Every single day is going to be going towards the goal. And I just think, I mean, that's really like half of it right there, you know?
Yeah. You know, writing a book, it's a simple way to say it, but it's one word at a time. One word leads to a sentence. One sentence leads to a paragraph. Paragraph leads to a page. Page leads to a chapter. Chapter leads to a book. And, you know, it's one foot in front of the other. And all of a sudden, you know, you're 50 pages into it. You go, wow, man, I've written 50 pages here. I can't believe it.
Snowball.
I never thought I'd write that many pages. And then you get 100 pages. And then it's 200 pages. And then, you know, the next step with it, and going back to my first rule of it, that, you know, the first draft of anything is crap. And then it's the process of polishing and editing. And, you know, you dig back into that first chapter and you go, oh man, this is terrible. But you just make it better. You know, you go, okay, I can put this word here. I can play with it a little bit more. Oh man, this would be even better if he says it this way. And so it becomes more satisfying, I guess, because you see it come along. You know, it's one thing to finish the marathon. It's another thing to, like, you know, truck it up and make it look pretty.
I like that. So I have one last question for you here. How do you hope that the book resonates with the readers, like especially the ones that, you know, haven't worked in the service industry? What message or what takeaway would you want them to have after reading the book?
Well, you know, I always say I want to educate people on the history of whiskey. You know, I do play with it, and like bourbon. So whiskey's been around for probably about 800 years in Britain, and whiskey's grain alcohol. And barley's a native grain to Britain, and that's why the Scots and the Irish started making whiskey out of barley way back when. Now, they've been fighting over who was the first to do it, but during the age of exploration, everywhere they went, they'd find a native grain and they'd start making whiskey out of it. So when they get to America, corn's native to America, they start making whiskey out of corn, and that was the first step in making bourbon. The second step came about when, at the time, everything was shipped in wooden barrels. But that was just a one-man roll. It had nothing to do with the aging process, because they didn't age it because you couldn't trust water. So if you had a little bit of alcohol to it, it's going to kill anything in there. It might kill you first and make it safe to drink. And so, yeah, if you were making a batch of whiskey and you had a barrel made out of pine, you fill that up, you'd send it on its way. You can imagine how it might affect the taste, but they just kind of dealt with it. But then they get to America, they start making barrels out of white American oak. They'd fill those up, send them away. They'd get to where they were going. Everybody was like, wow, man, this is great. Whatever you're doing, keep it up. You know, and so that was the second step in making bourbon. And the third step came about when you had your white American oak barrel that was filled with pickles or herring or crabs. You can imagine how that's affect the taste.
Yeah, that probably was terrible.
Oh, yeah. You know, so they started firing out the inside to get rid of the lingering flavors and odors and realize, wow, man, we got something here, you know? Now, that's kind of, so when I say I have a young Scotswoman who's kind of discovering the process for making bourbon, that's what she's doing, so to speak. So I want to teach people about that. Plus, I want to teach people, you know, the kind of the history of whiskey, how it's kind of distilled, the difference between Scotch and bourbon, all those sort of things. And then I also bring in a lot of the historical stuff. So there were really female pirates. There was one named Anne Bonny, and she was a very controversial, she's probably one of the most famous pirates, really. But she was married to a guy named Calico Jack Rackham, and when they were captured, Calico Jack and his crew had been spending all day drinking, and they were too drunk to fight, and they all hid below decks when the pirate hunter came up. Anne Bonny and Mary Read, who was another female pirate, were the only two that really put up a fight. And so the night before Calico Jack was executed, and Bonnie had said to him, you know, I hate to see it like this, but had you fought like a man, you need not be hung like a dog. And like, you know, kind of puts in perspective what she was all about. But, you know, I do want to bring out a lot of that stuff and kind of teach people like what life was really like. And it's not what we really see it as. There was a lot more nuance back then, just like there is now. And then I guess the last thing, you know, it's an entertaining thing. You know, there is nothing more satisfying for me than when somebody comes in and goes, man, I read your book. I loved it. I couldn't put it down. You know,
that's awesome.
That's the part of the ego that, you know, I still like getting that soothed. And I always ask who's your favorite character and stuff like that. But just to hear somebody say, you know, I loved your book, you know, I couldn't put it down. I read it in 3 days. Like, it's a very, it kind of gives me purpose. Because in the end, as a bartender, one thing I do is distract people from their life. You know, you come in and sit down, I'm going to start chatting with you. You know, whatever we talk about is what we're going to talk about. You're going to lead the conversation. But in the end, it's a distraction from a lot of times for a lot of people from what they don't want to think about. And so that's kind of what I want to do with my book, you know, give you a week that you can dive into bourbon and pirates with a little Shakespearean flair and forget about your life for a little while, you know, and that makes me feel good too.
That's awesome, man. And I got to read the book myself because it really sounds like it's a super interesting book and just like there's so much adventure. But it sounds like you learn a lot, you know, also over the different the history. And it sounds like you've really found a way to tie in history and education, but also like adventure and some fun. I think it's a really interesting way to bring everything together. Yeah.
Well, I appreciate that, and that's the idea of historical fiction. You know, hopefully I pulled it off. That's all I can say. You never know. In the end, it's your opinion that matters, not mine. So if you buy the book and you spend your money and you spend your time reading it, you know, I say too, that's an honor and it's a blessing that people will invest not just their money but their time. You know.
Yeah.
But in the end, it's your opinion that matters, not mine.
And so where can everyone find your book? I'll put everything up here in the description and everything.
So you can get it on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, or the Xlibris website. Xlibris is my publisher, and it's called A Shot of Oakies. And Oakies is spelled Oakies. And then, you know, should you ever be in the Chicagoland area and you want to come into the bar, you can always get a hold of me through Literary Booze, my Facebook or Instagram page, and I can let you know where I'm working. You can come down and see me. I can sell you a book across the bar, and I'll even sign it for you right then. But right now, the only other places you can get it is the online. You can get it through Amazon or Barnes & Noble or the publisher's website.
Awesome. So I'll definitely have all that stuff up here, and everyone can, you know, easily click it in the description so they can grab them a copy of Shot of Oakies. And before we go, I'd like to let you have the floor if you want to have any last words of wisdom for any of the viewers.
You know, I go back so I'll be 53 next Sunday. I'm turning 53, and I always say, you know, if life has taught me anything, number one, it's here to teach you lessons. And if you don't learn the lessons, it's going to teach you them again, and it's going to be more painful the next time around. And if you don't learn at that time, it's just going to get worse. And so go easy on yourself. Learn lessons the easy way. Somebody who knows already, has the experience already, tells you, I wouldn't do it that way. Don't do it that way. Do it the way they kind of, you know, take their advice. You might have to tailor it a bit, but to suit your needs. But in the end, you know, learn lessons as easy as possible. And then the other thing, you know, appreciate the things that you have. You know, don't focus or waste your time on what other people's have or what you want. Sometimes the things that you think you want the most are the worst for you. And if it doesn't work out, tell yourself that. I probably shouldn't have it anyway, and let it go. And then, you know, because you your experience in life is what matters. Your experience with your family, your experience with your friends, the people that you love, man. That is what you're going to always carry with you. You know, that thing that you want to buy, whether it's a nice car, a big house, or, you know, a model airplane or whatever. It doesn't work out that you don't get it. Well, it's probably better that it didn't.
Wow.
And let it go, because then it keeps you more focused on the things that matter.
I like that. That's so true. I appreciate that, and I really appreciate your time. Thank you for sharing all of your experiences here with the book and with your bartending and all the years of just experience, life experience. I really appreciate you being on here, and yeah, thank you once again. And everybody, you can find the book. I'm going to have it up here. I'm going to have everything in the description, and I appreciate you being on, man. Thanks for your time.
Oh, man. Thank you. I appreciate you having me. You know, it really is an honor. You know, anybody that's going to give me a chance to get on the floor and introduce myself and introduce my book, man, it's a blessing and an honor. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Absolutely. And when I make it over to Chicago, I'm going to have to come through and see you.
Awesome. I'll make you whatever drink you want.
All right, sounds good. All right, everyone. Thank you for watching. Everybody stay elevated.